Have you ever thought about, say, getting a particular car? Then suddenly you see that type of car everywhere. Maybe you're just noticing how many of those cars were there already. Wouldn't it be good to attune your mind to notice how many opportunities there are to become wealthier? Some people believe the mind is like a magnet, that what we hold uppermost in our attention, we attract to us. In other words, we always get more of what we focus on. In music, there's something called the principle of sympathetic resonance. If you have two pianos in the same room and you hit a C note on one piano, you'll find that the C string on the other piano will start vibrating in resonance at the same rate. In the same way, you're always attracting people and circumstances that resonate with your predominant thoughts. Whether you choose to believe in the law of attraction or not, it's interesting to note that many highly successful people do. Those who focus on the positive in life and attract it to them are called lucky. I personally believe we create our own luck. That is what's meant when it says in the Bible, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." Your thoughts are an energy that are powerful and creative. I've found that most wealthy and successful people tend to employ the same simple habits and beliefs about prosperity. However, the same rule of habits and beliefs applies to poverty as well. I believe that many people help to keep themselves poor through the beliefs and habits they have towards money. They use the evidence that their lack of money has made them poor, whereas sometimes their poor behaviors in relation to money is what keeps them from experiencing abundance. They've affirmed over and over again, often unconsciously, that they're poor, so it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy, a poverty consciousness. What the positivity system does is helps you to change that. I'd like to share with you some techniques that I've used myself that have helped me dramatically increase my personal wealth. I've taught them to others, they've also increased their wealth, and now I'd like to share them with you. One of the first things that made a major difference for me was consciously deciding to do things differently. Years ago, I definitely had a poverty consciousness, worrying constantly about being poor or how not to be poor. So guess what? My attention was, yes, on poverty. For example, when a bill would come through the mail, I'd open it, I'd worry about how I was going to pay it, I'd feel poor inside. Obviously, it's important to be financially organized and consider how best to pay bills. However, I was also affirming to my unconscious mind a poverty belief. If you're going to be wealthy, it's just as important to prepare for wealth by feeling rich inside. So what I started to do when I opened a bill was vividly imagine I had thousands in the bank. You can imagine how good that feels. I was sending a new message to my unconscious. Some people try saying affirmations like, "I am truly wealthy." But if deep down you don't believe that, it's next to useless. You have to create a feeling of wealth by vividly imagining yourself as wealthy over and over again. Next, I needed to change my self-image around money. I had a scruffy little checkbook, one that reflected my scruffy little finances at the time. So I changed banks and got a clean new one to help me start to feel different. The mind is sensitive, so it's important to signal to yourself that positive changes are happening. Then the real fun began. I needed to get a strong sense of what greater wealth would be like. So I got an old bank statement, cut it up, removing the bits that said overdrawn, and began to rearrange the figures and glued it back together, showing that I had thousands in credit. As soon as I'd finished, I burst out laughing. Actually holding it in my hands, it began to feel more real. Within a few months, the imaginary amount had become a reality. Having that tangible piece of paper, the bank statement, had really helped. So I went about making a scrapbook, collecting pictures of things I wanted, places I wanted to visit, people I wanted to meet. Remember, the mind needs a sensory-rich experience of what you want it to make real for you. It's important to have big dreams so you can grow into them. For example, a few years ago, I went into a Mercedes showroom, sat in a car to get comfortable, smelled the leather, went for a test drive, imagined vividly it was my own, took away a brochure and added it to my scrapbook. Imagined driving it every day. Pretty soon, I started to see Mercedes everywhere. My mind was now focused on getting me one. And chance favors the prepared mind. So it wasn't long before a bargain came along, and I bought my first Mercedes. As George Bernard Shaw said, "Some men see things and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask, why not?" A friend of mine got really into this type of creative visualization. He'd been practicing on visualizing parking spaces. Amazingly, it seemed to work. So he decided to go for bigger things. He'd never traveled abroad, and he really wanted to, but he didn't have the finances. So he collected together a bunch of travel brochures, cut out the pictures of all the places he wanted to go, and stuck them in his scrapbook. This is the funny part. He packed his suitcase every Sunday for a month and went to the airport. He even stood in line. He'd then come home and watch a video of a program about traveling on Concorde and look through his scrapbook at all the places he wanted to go. He really gave himself, his unconscious mind, that experience of traveling to and enjoying exotic locations. He focused on it for a month non-stop because he believed you always get more of what you focus on. Suddenly, he was called into his boss's office and asked if he would become their international correspondent. His boss explained it would mean traveling all over the world. He could hardly believe it. Most amazingly of all, when he arrived in a small village in Switzerland, he began to get a feeling of déjà vu. It was only when he got back to England and checked in his scrapbook that he found it was the exact same village that he'd been visualizing. Extraordinary as it may seem, I've witnessed many such occurrences similar to this since. I personally have become more skeptical about coincidences and am willing to consider that in some cases it's as though the mind may actually have the ability to attract events, things, or people to us. When I made a TV series about paranormal phenomena, we featured one experiment conducted by a French scientist. He created a robot that moved in a random pattern around the room. Then, he hatched a group of chicks. When a chick's born, the first thing it sees it believes to be its mother. This process is called imprinting. The chicks imprinted on the robot as their mother. Then, he put the chicks in a cage in one corner of the room and switched the robot on. Amazingly, it stopped moving randomly around the room and moved over to the area where the chicks were. There it stayed, moving back and forth. Strong evidence for the existence of what's known as psychokinesis, or in other words, mind over matter. It appeared that the chicks were somehow willing the robot that they believed to be their mother to stay with them. At Princeton University, hundreds of thousands of experiments have been conducted testing human ability to influence machines and physical matter. When I made my TV program about paranormal phenomena, I interviewed Dr. Michael Ibbison from Princeton University, who'd been conducting a number of experiments which strongly point to the existence of psychokinesis. Some people are better at it than others, but it's like anything. The more you practice it, the better at it you get. I began to wonder, could it really be possible to literally attract money? What is interesting is that many rich people believe that's how they do it. But how do you do it? It's very simple, but it does take regular practice. You're going to need to rehearse being wealthy, like a method actor would play a part, and do it over and over again. Totally get into that part. Okay, the first thing you need to do is get a scrapbook and start collecting pictures of things that you want, people you'd like to meet, places you'd like to go, things that you really want, anything that you want to bring into your life. Incidentally, it can just be a symbol you desire. Then, go about creating sensory-rich experiences of your goals. If it's a particular car, go about getting a test ride. Then it'll be easier to vividly imagine driving one over and over again. If it's a beautiful house, imagine walking around it until you know every inch of it. The feeling of the carpet, the smell, the texture of the furniture, and so on. Also, be open to feedback from your unconscious mind. When I first imagined owning a Bentley, I was visualizing driving it down the road. But other cars kept bashing into me. No matter how hard I kept trying to get out of the way. I took this to be a warning that, although I could get a Bentley, the cost at the time might be some jealousy. In other words, there was a cost greater than money than I'd foreseen. The next step is, every day, look at your scrapbook. Imagine what it would be like living your desire. See what you'll see, hear what you'll hear, and feel how good it'll feel. Do it as often as you can every day. You may not get instant results. You can imagine how chaotic the world would be if every whim or fancy we ever had suddenly materialized, but you will begin to set the process in action. Okay, I'd like you to stop for a moment and imagine how your life would be different if you are much wealthier. How will you walk?